In recent years, SpaceX has launched about 2,000 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit as part of its aim to provide high-speed internet from space. However, their most recent launch launched 49 satellites into a solar storm, burning them to a crisp. If that piqued your interest, then you're in luck, because today we're going to tell you how SpaceX lost more than 40 satellites to a solar storm on the Sun. You may all be thinking, how did this even happen? Did SpaceX not plan for this? Well, stay with us as we walk you through the disaster. So let's begin the video. Let's start with the good news. The flock of 40 SpaceX Starlink satellites, currently descending from orbit and heading for Earth, struck from the sky by a geomagnetic storm originating from the Sun, poses no threat to anyone on the ground. The little 260-kilogram satellites will be readily incinerated by atmospheric drag before they reach the surface. The bad news, on the other hand, the fact that a cluster of 40 SpaceX Starlink satellites is currently descending from orbit at all. The spacecraft were part of a payload of 49 Starlink satellites that SpaceX launched into orbit on February 3rd, intending to join the 1,925 other Starlinks already circling the planet in orbits ranging from 540 kilometers to 1,300 kilometers, with the goal of improving and providing universal access to internet service. All Starlinks are initially placed in a temporary parking orbit just 209 kilometers up, as is standard procedure for SpaceX, so that they can be run through a systems checkout from the ground to ensure they're working properly. Any duds are simply left in that low orbit where atmospheric drag drags them back out of the sky on an incinerating re-entry. However, that approach implies that the Sun behaves, which it did not on January 29th, blasting a storm of charged particles known as a coronal mass ejection toward Earth. Solar storms of this type normally pose a minimal threat to Earth, and the Space Weather Prediction Center, a part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, gave the storm a 2 on a scale of 1 to 5, indicating moderate severity. The catch: the charged particle tidal wave was projected to hit Earth on February 2nd or 3rd, right around the time SpaceX was planning its Starlink launch. When a burst of solar wind, charged particles from the Sun, collides with Earth's magnetic field, it generates charged particles and currents in the upper atmosphere, causing geomagnetic storms. The surge warms the upper atmosphere and raises atmospheric density to the point that satellites in low Earth orbit may suffer enough drag to send them tumbling back to Earth. The company went ahead with its plans nonetheless, saying nothing about the wisdom of not waiting out the storm, but instead merely announcing in a blog post, "On Thursday, February 3rd at 1:13 p.m. EST, Falcon 9 launched 49 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Falcon 9's second stage deployed the satellites into their intended orbit with a perigee of approximately 210 kilometers above Earth, and each satellite achieved controlled flight." However, that discreet notification hid what appears to be a catastrophic miscalculation. When energy from a solar storm hits Earth, it causes the atmosphere to expand significantly, causing satellites in a safe 209-kilometer parking orbit to suddenly face a lot of air resistance, which can lead them to fall back to Earth. As soon as the 49 satellites entered orbit, SpaceX became aware of the problem and sought to ride out the storm by putting the comparatively flat-shaped spacecraft edge forward to reduce air resistance. The Starlink team commanded the satellites into a safe mode where they would fly edge-on, like a sheet of paper, to minimize the drag, to effectively take cover from the storm, SpaceX posted. Preliminary analysis shows the increased drag at the low altitudes prevented the satellites from leaving safe mode to begin orbit-raising maneuvers, and up to 40 of the satellites will re-enter or already have re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. Ground controllers put the satellites into a hibernation state and flew them in a way that minimized drag after the launch in an attempt to save them from certain death. The atmosphere, however, was too thick, and the satellites were unable to reach their higher, more stable orbit. In this case, physics won out over SpaceX, and just 9 of the fleet of 49 were able to use the safe mode maneuver. The others were effectively clawed out of the sky and are either re-entering the atmosphere now or will before the end of the week. Enjoying the video? Why did SpaceX go ahead with its plans despite knowing the risks? While you think, subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to receive instant notifications about all our future videos. Why the company went forward with the launch despite the storm isn't clear. "It's a bit of a surprise," says Jonathan McDowell, an astronomer at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. "They should have been ready for this, one would have thought." SpaceX praised itself for addressing the situation with minimum risk to other satellites, as well as people and property on the ground, while disregarding the question of whether it would have been better to just delay the launch for a week or so. This unique situation demonstrates the great lengths the Starlink team has gone to ensure the system is on the leading edge of on-orbit debris mitigation, the company wrote. The deorbiting satellites pose zero collision risk with other satellites and by design demise upon atmospheric re-entry, meaning no orbital debris is created and no satellite parts hit the ground, SpaceX continued in the statement. Jacob Gear, the UK Space Agency's head of space surveillance, said he does not expect any part of the satellites to hit the ground. Events like this are a reminder that space is challenging. Getting satellites or astronauts into orbit is still not easy, he said. As part of its internet mega constellation, SpaceX has launched nearly 2,000 Starlink satellites and says it will eventually need as many as 42,000 satellites. The satellites orbit 340 miles above Earth, which is low enough to get pulled back down to Earth and not end up as space junk when they're no longer operational. NASA, for its part, remained silent on the issue but chose to criticize SpaceX and Starlink in other ways this week. NASA raised concerns about the Starlink program as a whole in a 5-page letter to the Federal Communications Commission on February 7th. Specifically, whether the company's plan for a final Starlink constellation of more than 30,000 satellites will increase collision risks with other orbiting assets, including crewed spacecraft, and interfere with atmospheric observations. NASA has concerns with the potential for a significant increase in the frequency of conjunction events and possible impacts to NASA's science and human spaceflight missions, the space agency wrote. Consequently, NASA submits this letter for the purpose of providing a better understanding of NASA's concerns with respect to its assets on orbit and to further mitigate the risk of collisions for the benefit of all involved. The timing of the letter may have been coincidental or may have been planned as a reminder that for all its global star power, SpaceX remains a private company subject to public laws. Without NASA's support and FCC approval, future Starlinks could remain grounded. The 40 satellites now on their death plunge might be a small part of SpaceX's larger plans. Avoiding future incidents like the one unfolding this week could go a long way to determining if those plans will indeed be realized. This isn't the only issue. SpaceX satellites, according to critics, clog up near-Earth orbital slots that could otherwise be employed by other corporations or countries. According to the live science sister site Space.com, after the first 12,000 satellites of Starlink's first-generation constellation are in orbit, they might be responsible for up to 90% of near misses between two spacecraft in low Earth orbit. Josef Aschbacher, the Director General of the European Space Agency, said in December 2021 that Musk was making the rules in space and that the European Union and other countries should work together to ensure that SpaceX's satellites do not hinder others from launching their own. In its effort to beam internet to faraway locations, SpaceX is not alone. OneWeb and Amazon, both based in London, have plans to launch satellites in the future years. The large number of satellites entering Earth's orbit raises fears that if they fail, they'll add to the dangerous space debris. Others are concerned that the illuminated satellites will pollute the night sky's darkness. So, do you think SpaceX should have waited for the conditions to clear? Or was their calculated risk the right call? What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to watch more of our amazing videos, then stay tuned.